Kansas State has been a consistent team for a while, and it's been a team that expects to be in the conversation for the Big 12 championship. And this year is going to be no different, even in a conference that is full of volatility and competition. This is a team that expects to be at the top of the conference when it's all said and done. Now, we are waiting to see them take that step. A lot of that hinges on the quarterback, but we're going to take a deep dive into the Kansas State Wildcats to see what Chris Kleiman's squad should be able to do in 2025. 2024 wasn't a bad year. 9-4 season, an offense that had explosive playmakers. They do lose a couple of those big names, but you also return a number of big names that should take a step. Matt Wells is going to be the offensive coordinator, and I think that he's a really good fit for what this team has returning and brings in. Now, the defense is a group that you probably don't know any of their names, and that's just how Kansas State wants it to be. Now, the biggest name that there's two names that you'll probably know. Three, you know what? Three names. Three names you probably do know if you're a college football fan, but overall, I think a lot of the casuals would say that they don't know who those players are, and the defense is full of them. And that's exactly where Kansas State thrives. That's exactly where they want to be, and that's the kind of situation or position that they need to be in to make that kind of a run to get to the top of the Big 12. They have people that doubt them every single year, and this year it feels like they may have more doubters than supporters than they did, I should say, in 2024. The roster changes, you lose DJ Giddens. We obviously knew that he was going pro, and it was a fun back. I think that he took a big step last year, and you could make an argument that they're really going to miss him. The transfer portal didn't do a ton of damage in terms of big time playmakers, so you're feeling pretty good about what you have coming back. Obviously, when you lose some players to the NFL, Jacob Parrish is going to be a big loss for them, but you didn't lose him to another team. You lost him to the NFL. So that's a really exciting thing for this team, for Kleiman's squad, is that you didn't lose a ton of talent that was potentially going to be a major contributor, and now they take their talents to another team and perform over there. So you're feeling pretty good about what you brought in as well. I think that the secondary benefited a lot. Same with the offensive line. The offensive line will be interesting. A guy like JB Nelson, I'm curious where he'll end up playing. Terrence Enos is another guy. You'll see a lot of different players that are going to step up. The wide receiver position, I think the passing attack actually in general is where we really need to see this group take a step. You obviously have the big name in Jace Brown, but you bring in Jerron Bradley from Boston College, a former Texas Tech transfer. Jaron Tibbs, you're expecting big things from. Caleb Medford has a lot of potential as an explosive threat. You bring in talent that you're hoping raises your ceiling. I think that Kansas State is your traditionally high floor team. You're just trying to find a way to raise your ceiling. And if you can do that, you're going to put yourself in that Big 12 championship conversation. And they're right there already. It's just you're going to put yourself more seriously into that conversation. Now, we talked about this before. Avery Johnson is going to basically dictate how successful this team is. He will determine if they are a Big 12 championship contender or if they are going to be just near the top. He dictates the success of this team. Over 2,700 yards last year and 25 touchdowns. You'd like to see him reduce those 10 interceptions and keep the ball with his offense, because this offense is stacked in terms of talent. This offense has the ability to make a ton of big plays, but you can't do that if you don't have the ball. Now, he's also a dynamic runner, 605 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think at times they held him back from running, which makes sense. You don't want him to be running all over the place. You'd rather see your wide receivers step up and make plays. You'd rather see some of your running backs make those plays, but make no mistake about it, he's an elite runner that can make big plays and can make things happen. They just liked him to maybe extend plays a little bit more when he's passing instead of taking off and run. And I think we saw a little bit of that last year. You just want to see him do it a little bit more. But again, he determines how successful this team is. He dictates how high they can go, and if a college football playoff run is in the cards for them. If he becomes more consistent as a passer, more accurate as a passer, and can combine that with his running ability, you're looking at an offense that is scary good. And that's without DJ Giddens. Then That's going to be really fun if that all plays out. Now, behind him, you have Jacob Knuth, Blake Barnett. You're looking at two guys that could step up in a big way if they need to, but you don't have a ton of production, obviously. That's probably the scariest part of this team, is that if Avery Johnson can't go, who are you going to turn to? I know that the staff really likes what they have, and the lack of experience is probably what the fan base is most concerned about. But I think the talent level is there. It just might not be on Avery Johnson's level. The running back position, even though you lose DJ Giddens, I think there aren't a lot of teams that could handle a loss like DJ Giddens and feel as confident as Kansas State does. But when you return to talent like Dylan Edwards, you feel like you're in a great place. Now, getting Dylan Edwards to return back to Kansas State, he starts out at Colorado as a freshman, comes back to the state of Kansas and lands at Kansas State, and he was the perfect complement to DJ Giddens. 7.4 yards per carry, 546 yards, 5 touchdowns rushing. He also had 133 yards receiving with 2 more scores. I'm very excited to see how Matt Wells can get him more involved. And they're still going to have a dynamic duo, a good complementary backfield. Joe Jackson is that bigger back like DJ Giddens that will bring a little bit different running style than Dylan Edwards, but you're going to find different ways to get them involved. Edwards obviously is a little bit smaller. You're going to try to find ways to get him out in space, get him opportunities to showcase his speed, because he has track speed. He is going to be really fun and very difficult to tackle if you're an opposing defender. That's going to be a really good duo to have. You also add into the mix Gabe Ervin Jr. from Nebraska. Didn't have the best year in 2024, but when you look at his production over his career, you see the potential in his game, and he is going to be part of this rotation. It's probably going to be a 3-man backfield. I think Dylan Edwards is for sure RB1, but you're going to see plenty of touches for all 3 of them. Antonio Martin's an interesting player from Southeast Louisiana. He had over 1,200 yards last year and 11 touchdowns. So overall, running back depth is in a good place. Running back position is set. They're good to go. They feel like they're in a good position with the depth they have, with the talent that they have, and they feel that this rushing attack could be just as good as it was last year, even if it looks a little bit different. But again, that should be expected. We knew that was going to happen. And like we mentioned before, it's going to come down to the passing attack. Avery Johnson holds a lot of responsibility with that, and you feel pretty good about what he has returning. Jace Brown is another name that he's probably the third guy I was talking about before, where I don't necessarily know if people outside of the Big 12 know who Jace Brown is. And this is a guy who had 823 yards and 5 touchdowns, averaged 17.5 yards per catch. I don't think a lot of people know his name because of the Jeremiah Smiths and the Ryan Williams of the world. Jace Brown is super talented, and he has a confidence to him where you're not worried about his abilities, and mentally, physically. He has all the confidence in the world. He has the talent to make huge plays, and we saw that last year. You're going to see it again. Avery Johnson has his go-to guy back, and Jace Brown is someone who can make big plays, not just explosive plays downfield in terms of yardage. He is someone that is very capable of making one-handed grabs and acrobatic catches. He is someone that can put you on a highlight reel very quick, whether it's making that 50-50 ball catch, yards after the catch. He is one of the best wide receivers that I don't think really anybody's talking about outside of the Big 12, and I don't think a ton of people are talking about him inside the Big 12. He is someone that is flying under the radar for as productive as he was last year, and that probably is going to change if Kansas State does continue on the trajectory that they're on right now. Jerand Bradley is a big body at 6'5", 223 pounds. He gives them a big target downfield. And like I said, sometimes Avery Johnson needs a little bit more room for error. A guy like Bradley gives you that. Jaron Tibbs is another guy that could be in that same realm. 6'2", 212 pounds. 305 yards last year and 2 touchdowns with Purdue. And Purdue was terrible last year. Purdue was just not what you wanted to see if you're a college football program and you're watching your team. Purdue is just awful last year, but they did have some bright spots and some talent that is looking for new opportunities, and Tibbs is going to get his chance here. The biggest name in the depth is going to be Caleb Medford, a guy who averaged 18.7 yards per catch at New Mexico. And New Mexico wasn't exactly a passing offense, so his production was pretty impressive. I think that he could also step up and play a role if Bradley or Tibbs aren't able to go, or if they're not consistent, injured, whatever it may be. The depth after that, though, is probably a little bit of a concern. Someone like Larry Porter the fourth, a freshman, could step up and play a bigger role. Sterling Lockett is looking to become more part of the rotation, but I don't know how that's all going to play out. I know that they have options, but you don't have a ton of proven options behind the guys that are going to start. And Jace Brown is probably the one consistent piece that you have. You're just looking for two, maybe three other guys to step up and play a bigger role. The tight end position is loaded. This is going to be a deep group that probably uses multiple tight end sets quite frequently. Garrett Oakley is back after a second team all Big 12 selection. Same with Will Swanson, who was honorable mention all Big 12. That's a good tight end duo to have back. You also have some promising talent, a guy like Braden Lofton and freshman Lincoln Cure, who Kansas State somehow got over a lot of other bigger schools. I think that he could play a bigger role right off the bat. That's a really exciting for the win for them on the recruiting trail. They keep him in the state, they keep him around, and he is the next man up. He gets to learn from Oakley and Swanson and potentially play a role in this offense as well. The offensive line is going to be physical. That much is pretty much a guarantee. And you have plenty of experience coming in from the transfer portal. You also return quite a bit of experience as well. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a transition. You do have plenty of new faces, like I said, that need to be able to get up to speed. Guys like Sam Heck, Taylor Poitier, and John Pastore are going to be three guys that are coming back. They understand the culture, they understand what's expected of them, and will get the other guys up to speed. Now, Hecht and Poitier are going to be the two guys that have the starting experience, so they understand what it's like to play a full game consistently. You have other interesting players that come in from the transfer portal. George Fitzpatrick comes in from Ohio State. We talked about JB Nelson. He could be a potential starter at guard. Amos Talalele is going to be another guy that is a massive body at 6'6", 375 pounds. He and JB Nelson, for right now, I think are battling out to see who will start at one of the guard positions. But JB Nelson has the ability to slide out to tackle. You have a number of versatile players that could play that role as well. Terrence Enos is a guy that I don't have listed on the screen here, but he is someone that could be a factor as well. He could slip into one of the starting spots. He'll be a depth piece at worst, and that's really exciting if you're a Kansas State fan. You also have plenty of guys that are experienced. Nelson's one of them. Michael Capria is another guy at center that could play an integral part of this offense. Played 13 games last year, so all 13 games he saw time. Andrew Langang is going to be another guy that if you need a guard, you have depth. He and Nelson are ready to go and will probably push for time. That's good competition to have. That's players that are ready to go and ready to prove their worth. They're going to push the guys that are starting up front. And that's an offensive line that needs to give Avery Johnson time, that needs to block for what's a different kind of a rushing attack. And you have the talent to do it. You have the size to do it. You have the experience. You have everything that you need to be successful. But that's the group that's probably the biggest X factor outside of Avery Johnson. Everything else seems pretty set for the most part. The offense just is going to rely on an offensive line to be physical and the quarterback position to take a step with the passing abilities. That's going to be the biggest questions for this group. Now, I mentioned that this defense is going to be a group that you probably don't know. Honestly, if you ask people if they can name one single player on Kansas State's defense, most people probably wouldn't be able to. And that's exactly, honestly, this sounds bad. And I feel like these are the kinds of teams that I feel bad for in a way, because it's like nobody knows who you are. And that hurts sometimes, but also teams like Kansas State are happy to be in that position. They've almost embraced that as their identity of nobody knows who we are, but we'll let you know. And this is a group that is just tough as nails. Now, there are not a ton of elite athletic playmakers, but that being said, there are plenty of players that can make plays. There are plenty of playmakers on this defense. It's just not going to be your traditional 4 or 5 star talent that everybody was coveting coming out of high school. This is a coaching staff that understands what kind of player fits their system, what kind of player fits their culture, and they thrive on getting those players. So a guy like Chidi Obiazar is not going to be someone you know a ton. Same thing with Cody Stufflebean. Damian Elalio is going to be another guy that is in that same realm where you're just not sure what you're going to get from them until they get on campus or that they're in the right fit. And you're just not going to see them go to those traditional powerhouses. That being said, if you don't think that these 3 guys can give you a run for your money, then you're sadly mistaken. And that's what makes Kansas State competitive. They find the right guys that come with a chip on their shoulder because nobody wanted them, and they play the game with a ton of passion and a ton of effort, and that's the only way they know how to play. And this starting lineup for this defensive line for Kansas State is good, and they also have good depth behind him. Travis Bates is someone who 13 tackles last year, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Uso Siamalo, 14 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. Toby Osusanmi is going to be another guy that had a ton of production. 19 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. So that's a deep group at defensive line. That's a group that is going to give you plenty of challenges and will be tough to block. And the battles in practice will be really exciting. And if you're a team that has to face Kansas State, I almost feel sorry for you because you are facing a group that, again, they're not going to be the most explosive. They're not going to be the most athletic, but they are going to give you the worst day, night, whenever you play them, time of your season. They are going to make you earn it. They're going to make you play all 4 quarters. If you do not play 4 quarters against Kansas State with some of these guys that they have, you are in for a long day. You are in for a long game. And the defensive line is a good group to get that started. And fortunately for them, the linebackers behind them are more of the same. I don't think a lot of people know who Austin Romaine is. I don't think anybody knows who Desmond Purnell is. I think the only person that people might know is Gabe Powers, and they only probably know him is because he transferred from Ohio State. And Austin Rain is a second-team All-Big 12 selection who had 96 tackles and 8 tackles for loss. Desmond Purnell, 46 tackles, 10 tackles for loss. Those are 2 playmakers who right now are better than Gabe Powers. Gabe Powers is going to start in this lineup. He's going to be a great addition to this team, and that just speaks to how people just don't know this team. And now the teams that they play do, obviously, right? They scout them, they know. But the casual fan does not know who this group is. As soon as you play this team, though, you quickly find out who's this 45 that's making these plays. Who's this 32 that keeps living in our backfield? Those are guys that are going to make your life miserable, and that's really exciting for Kansas State. Now, the depth isn't as deep as what it was for the defensive line, so that's maybe one concern that you might have. But Rex Van Wy comes back, 31 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. After that, you have Bo Palmer, Asa Newsome, and after that is really where you might have more questions. Who are the guys that can step up if an injury hits? There's a reason why you brought Gabe Powers in, and you needed depth. You needed someone who could step up and potentially be a starter. He obviously took that role. But what happens if one of them goes down? Who is going to be the player that steps up when they need them the most? Those are the big questions you have to ask. But again, a group that has plenty of talent, 2 guys that are natural playmakers that are going to bring this team to where they need to be defensively. And this is a defense that needs to improve. It was good at times, but I think you also saw some holes in this defense. Now, the secondary is an interesting group in the sense of you lose a couple of pieces that you are going to miss. Jacob Parrish is one of them. Marquez Seigel is going to be another. you lose players that made a big impact. But I think you bring in some talented players that could step up and replace them. Maybe not 1-to-1, but guys that can help this unit be better collectively. This is a group that finished 77th. And again, this is maybe the one downfall to this defense and what we talked about before. You're not going to see this defensive line get to the quarterback consistently. That's just not how it is. Someone like a Desmond Purnell is probably going to be that guy. And Purnell is of the returning people, he is the leading the sack leader with 4 from last year. You don't have a ton of guys that are proven to get to the quarterback. They're going to be disruptive, don't get me wrong, but it's probably not going to be getting to the quarterback quickly. That puts more pressure on this secondary. And I will say that this secondary in the past has had plenty of talented players that can cover and plenty of underrated talented players that can make plays. But sometimes it does get to them a little bit. And last year you saw that. They're looking to make that better. So while you do lose a couple players, you replace them with Gunnar Maldonado. Last year only played in 4 games. He just didn't, he was injuries and whatnot kept him out. But in 2023, he had 81 tackles, 2 interceptions, a natural playmaker for Arizona. He recovered 3 fumbles, 2 forced fumbles. He was doing everything. And when healthy, that's what he can do for Kansas State. And honestly, his playing style, if you look at that 2023 Arizona team, you look at the secondary, that's a group that honestly screams Kansas State. A bunch of guys that nobody really recruited and guys who play with a chip on their shoulder and are looking to just make plays. You also bring in Amarian Fortenberry from Southern Alabama or South Alabama. You bring in a guy who had 45 tackles last year, 2 interceptions. He'll compete for a starting spot. He'll be a guy that should contribute. Someone who is going to give your offense the ball back a little bit more. Opposite of him, Justice James gets his chance to step up with Jacob Parrish gone. So the cornerback positions are 2 new guys, 1 new to the program, 1 new to his role. Then you return the veterans of the group. VJ Payne, it was an honor mention all Big 12 selection last year, a proven playmaker with a ton of experience. Colby McAllister, not as experienced as Payne, but definitely has the experience to know what it takes to win football games at Kansas State. So your starting lineup is pretty much set. Behind them, you bring in Jaden Rowe from Oklahoma. You have Jack Fabris coming back. So Sean Rich is going to compete for a cornerback spot. Quay Moss is probably the wild card when it comes to the secondary. I think that he is someone who is ready to show that he can play at the next level. And he was productive for West Georgia, and they're excited to see what he can do. Everybody else has little experience and little production, but I think this is a group that's ready to take a step. I think they have the right pieces in place. They did a great job of identifying needs and finding the talent that's going to replace those needs. And overall, this is a group that when they're playing at their peak, they play together, they play collectively, and they are going to be a tough group to block and a tough group to move the ball on. And if you're going to win a Big 12 championship, you need a defense that's tough as nails. Because this is a team that is going to have a tough start with their first game, but also they're going to face some offenses that will challenge them immensely. Now, starting off the year in Ireland, playing Iowa State, another Big 12 team that expects to compete for a conference championship, is not an ideal way to start. But if there's a group that can handle that kind of a start, it's Kansas State. When you look at what we just talked about, this is a group that has plenty of experience. Yes, they need to get some things sorted out. They need some chemistry to be established. But you have a veteran group and experienced group that should be just fine to figure things out in the first week 0, if you will. Then you get North Dakota. You get a unique matchup in Army at home. Now, Army is not going to be what they were last year, but that is still a tough team. And then you go at Arizona before you get your first bye. The UCF game is probably going to be a relatively easier one, but you don't want to overlook anybody in this conference. Then you go at Baylor and TCU. That is a tough 2-game stretch. And honestly, the final stretch of the season is really where you are going to have to buckle up. But at Baylor will be tough. We'll know if Baylor is a contender or not. Same with TCU at this point, as well as Kansas State. Then you go at Kansas, Texas Tech, off at Oklahoma State, at Utah, and Colorado. So you have winnable games for sure. That's a reason why the over-under is 8.5. And it's a reason why a lot of you think they're going to finish first through fourth. 76% of you say first through fourth. 24% say fifth through eighth. So all of you think that they're eighth or better, and they're not going to have an imploding season. And then the depth chart says the exact same thing. The schedule tells you that. The depth chart says that. If everything goes right, this is a team that could go 12-0. Now, that is a lot has to go right for that to happen, but they can go 12-0. It's just going to be very tough to do. So realistically, that's why it's the ceiling. Realistically, this is probably a 9-3 team, 10-2. That's just how competitive the Big 12 is. Now, if everything goes terrible, I think 6-6 is the worst that they do. I mean, Iowa State's good. Army is tricky if things aren't going right for Kansas State, but I don't think that that's a game they necessarily will lose. Baylor, TCU, Kansas is a rivalry game, Texas Tech, Utah, even Colorado. You just never know in the Big 12 who's going to give you a hard time, who's going to challenge you, which is what makes this conference so fun, but it also means that there's a loss waiting for you at any point during the season. Kansas State is a team that has high aspirations for this year. They should be able to meet those goals. And then once they get to the end of the season, if they're in the Big 12 championship, they win the Big 12 championship, then they can turn their sights to the college football playoff and see what they can do from there.